Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be abandoned by someone who was supposed to protect you? For 12-year-old Michael Stevens of Bakersfield, California, this wasn't a hypothetical question, but a devastating reality that changed his life forever. Left alone with his deteriorating vision, Michael faced a world that grew darker with each passing day, both literally and figuratively. Winter in Bakersfield had never felt so cold as it did the day Andrew Stevens packed his bags and walked out of his son's life. The divorce had been difficult enough, but when Michael's mother Sarah passed away unexpectedly from a sudden aneurysm just months later, everyone assumed Andrew would step up for his only child. Instead, overwhelmed by grief and the prospect of raising a child with increasingly severe visual impairment, Andrew disappeared one night, leaving only a hastily written note and some cash on the kitchen counter. Michael Stevens wasn't born blind. His vision had been deteriorating gradually since age 8 due to a rare genetic condition called Stargardt disease. By 12, he could only perceive vague shapes and changes in lighting, and doctors predicted complete blindness within 2 years. What made it worse was that Michael remembered what the world looked like. He remembered his mother's gentle smile, the color of autumn leaves in the park near their home, and even the freckles that dotted his own nose when he looked in the mirror. Sarah's sister Elaine moved from Oregon to Bakersfield to become Michael's guardian, bringing her warm heart but limited resources to help a deeply traumatized child. Elaine worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, as a night shift nurse at Mercy Hospital and weekend shifts at a local diner. She loved her nephew fiercely, but the financial and emotional strain of suddenly becoming a parent to a special needs child left her exhausted and often absent from home, even though her heart ached to provide more stability. Michael's world quickly shrank to the confines of their modest 2-bedroom apartment and the specialized school for visually impaired students he attended 3 days a week. The other days, he sat alone in the apartment, listening to audiobooks and feeling the walls close in around him. His childhood friends from the neighborhood gradually stopped coming by, uncomfortable with his condition and unsure how to interact with him. The isolation wrapped around Michael like a heavy blanket, muffling his once bright personality. Nightmares plagued Michael's sleep, dreams where he called out for his father in pitch darkness, only to hear footsteps walking away. During the day, he struggled to learn Braille, his fingers fumbling over the raised dots that represented a new language he never wanted to learn. His teachers noticed his withdrawal, how the once eager student now sat silently in class, his unseeing eyes fixed on nothing as tears occasionally slipped down his cheeks. At school, Michael excelled academically but struggled socially. Other students, even those with similar visual impairments, found it hard to connect with a boy who seemed to carry a cloud of sadness everywhere he went. His counselor, Dr. Rivera, tried various therapeutic approaches but made little progress breaking through Michael's emotional walls. Walls built brick by brick, with each unanswered letter Michael dictated to Elaine, hoping his father would explain why he left. The apartment complex where Michael and Elaine lived was located in a working-class neighborhood on Bakersfield's east side, with cracked sidewalks that made navigation with a white cane particularly challenging. Neighbors were kind but distant, offering occasional casseroles and sympathetic smiles, but little substantive support. The building's maintenance man, Mr. Gonzalez, occasionally checked on Michael when Elaine worked late, but even these brief interactions felt like charity rather than friendship to the proud, hurting boy. 6 months after his father's departure, Michael stopped asking about him altogether. He removed the photos he kept by his bedside, images he could no longer see but would trace with his fingertips before sleep. When Elaine mentioned Andrew's name, Michael would change the subject abruptly or leave the room. His therapist called it a defense mechanism, but to Michael, it felt like the only way to breathe without pain shooting through his chest. By his 13th birthday, Michael's remaining vision had deteriorated to the point where he could only distinguish between light and dark. The birthday celebration Elaine carefully planned fell flat when Michael refused to open his presents or blow out his candles. That night, Elaine heard him crying in his room, not with the loud sobs of a child, but with the quiet, defeated tears of someone who had given up on expecting good things from life. The walking route from their apartment to Michael's school crossed through Jastrow Park, a green space that had once been Michael's favorite place to play. Now, it represented a gauntlet of obstacles, unpredictable terrain, loud children whose movements he couldn't track, and the constant fear of becoming disoriented. Michael had memorized the number of steps and turns required to navigate the path, counting under his breath as he tapped his white cane against the ground with growing expertise but diminishing enthusiasm. Michael's doctor at Valley Children's Ophthalmology Center, Dr. Patel, had suggested a guide dog might eventually be beneficial, but the waiting lists were long, and most organizations required recipients to be at least 16 years old. Besides, as Michael bitterly remarked to his aunt, "What's the point of seeing eye dogs when there's nothing left to see?" This cynicism from a 13-year-old broke Elaine's heart, but her attempts to encourage optimism fell on increasingly deaf ears. In their neighborhood lived various families with children Michael's age, but interactions grew awkward as his condition worsened. Parents didn't know what to say, children didn't know how to include him in their games, and gradually, birthday party invitations stopped arriving. Michael's world of social connections contracted until it consisted primarily of adults, healthcare providers, educators, and his overworked aunt, all of whom related to him through the lens of his disability rather than seeing the complex, intelligent boy underneath. The financial strain of Michael's medical needs created additional tension in the household. Insurance covered some expenses, but specialized equipment, private therapy sessions, and transportation to medical appointments in Los Angeles quickly depleted Elaine's savings. She never complained in Michael's presence, but he overheard her tearful late-night phone conversations with creditors and felt the weight of being a burden, another abandonment waiting to happen. Spring arrived in Bakersfield with unseasonable rain that year, creating new challenges for Michael's navigation. The usual environmental cues he relied upon, the warmth of sun indicating direction, the sound of traffic at particular intersections, became muffled and distorted in the constant downpour. After a particularly difficult day when he got lost coming home from school and was found shivering under a shop awning by a concerned stranger, Michael refused to leave the apartment for 3 consecutive days. Michael's room became his sanctuary and prison, a space he could navigate with confidence, but also where he retreated from the world's challenges. He arranged his belongings with meticulous precision, creating a system only he understood. Any disruption to this order, even well-intentioned cleaning by Elaine, would trigger hours of anxious reorganization and reinforced his belief that he could only rely on himself and his carefully constructed environment. The summer before Michael turned 14 marked 1 year since his father's departure and brought with it a heat wave that baked the Central Valley in triple-digit temperatures. The ancient air conditioner in their apartment frequently malfunctioned, leaving Michael alone in stifling heat while Elaine was at work. These long, silent, sweltering days seemed to embody Michael's existence, uncomfortable, isolated, and forgotten by those who should have cared most. Elaine's brother-in-law, Mark, occasionally visited from Sacramento, bringing temporary masculine energy into Michael's life. Though well-intentioned, Mark's awkward attempts at connection, invitations to watch baseball games or suggestions to look at his new car model, highlighted how poorly equipped most people were to engage with Michael's reality. After each visit, Michael withdrew further, his heart hardening against well-meaning but painful reminders of what he had lost. Despite his challenges, Michael's intelligence remained sharp, perhaps even enhanced by his reliance on memory and non-visual information processing. His teachers noted his exceptional ability to retain information presented orally, and his creative writing assignments revealed a rich inner world, filled with detailed sensory descriptions that amazed his instructors. If only they lamented in staff meetings, they could find a way to reignite his passion for living with the same intensity he brought to his academic work. When the first anniversary of Sarah's death arrived, Elaine took Michael to the cemetery with flowers. Standing before his mother's grave, unable to see the headstone but feeling the freshly mowed grass beneath his feet, Michael finally broke his emotional silence. "Mom would be so disappointed in Dad," he whispered, his voice catching. "And sometimes I think she'd be disappointed in me too for giving up." This vulnerable admission marked the first crack in the wall he had built around his heart. It was on a particularly sweltering August afternoon that Michael's life changed forever. Elaine had left for an early evening shift at the hospital, and Michael sat on the apartment balcony, face tilted toward the fading warmth of the sun he could barely perceive. The sound came first, a pitiful whining from somewhere near the building's dumpsters. Michael hesitated, his white cane clutched tightly in his hand. He hadn't ventured outside alone in weeks, but something in that sound pulled at him, resonating with his own loneliness. Following the noise required all of Michael's concentration, counting steps from the familiar territory of his apartment, landing into the unknown terrain behind the building. The whimpering grew louder, punctuated by a weak bark that confirmed his suspicion. An animal in distress. "Hello," Michael called softly, tapping his cane in a semicircle before him. His foot connected with something warm and trembling, and he knelt carefully, hands outstretched with uncharacteristic courage toward the unknown. What Michael's fingers found was a mass of matted fur, ribs prominent beneath his exploring touch, and a frantically licking tongue that seemed grateful for human contact. "You're just skin and bones," Michael whispered, running his hands over what he determined to be a medium-sized dog. No collar met his searching fingers, and when he attempted to stand, the dog whimpered pathetically, unable or unwilling to rise. Making a split-second decision that would later seem divinely guided, Michael carefully gathered the surprisingly light animal into his arms. Getting back to the apartment with a malnourished stray dog while navigating near-complete blindness proved to be an exercise in determination that Michael hadn't known he still possessed. Each step required recalculation, his cane unusable with his arms full of trembling canine. What should have been a 2-minute walk took nearly 20, but Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a sense of purpose that transcended his own suffering. Someone needed him more than he needed self-pity. A dog, which Michael determined by careful touch to be a male golden retriever, lay listlessly on a makeshift bed of towels in the bathroom. Michael filled a bowl with water, guiding the dog's muzzle to it with gentle hands, and called the only person he could think of, Elena Ramirez, a veterinary technician who lived 2 floors above them and occasionally brought Michael audiobooks. "He's probably been abandoned," Elena explained after examining the dog. "Severe malnutrition, minor infections, but nothing fatal with proper care. The real question is what you plan to do with him." Elaine's reaction upon returning home to find her visually impaired nephew had somehow acquired a sickly stray dog was predictably one of concern. "Michael, we can barely afford your medical treatments. A dog requires food, veterinary care, responsibilities we simply cannot take on right now." Michael listened silently, his hand resting protectively on the sleeping retriever's head. When Elaine finished, he spoke with quiet conviction. "When Dad left, everyone told you taking me was too much responsibility too. Sometimes responsibilities choose us, not the other way around." The 2 weeks that followed brought a transformation that no one could have predicted. The dog, temporarily named Chance by Michael, gained strength with each passing day. Elena provided basic medications and advice, while Michael devoted himself entirely to the animal's recovery, measuring food with careful fingers, bathing matted fur with meticulous attention, and spending hours simply sitting beside the recovering animal, talking about his feelings in ways he never could with his therapist. More remarkable than Chance's physical recovery was the change in Michael. For the first time since losing the remainder of his sight, he ventured outside willingly, initially just to walk Chance in the small grass patch behind their building. These excursions grew gradually longer as Michael's confidence increased. Chance seemed to possess an uncanny awareness of Michael's limitations, walking precisely at his left side, stopping at curbs and obstacles before Michael's cane detected them, and gently pulling him back from potential hazards. What began as a coincidence of rescued animal behavior evolved into something that left even Elena, with her years of animal experience, amazed. "I've never seen anything like it," she confessed to Elaine. "He hasn't been trained as a guide dog, but he's naturally protective and seems to understand exactly what Michael needs." Chance would position himself between Michael and approaching strangers, bark once sharply at unexpected obstacles, and lead Michael back to their apartment building whenever the boy became disoriented. The school year began with Michael returning to his specialized classes, but with a new request that initially met resistance from administrators. "A service animal requires certification," Principal Winters explained firmly. "Without proper documentation, we simply cannot allow a stray dog on school premises, regardless of how well behaved he might be." Michael's hands tightened around Chance's makeshift harness, his unseeing eyes fixed somewhere past the principal's shoulder with unusual determination. Dr. Rivera, witnessing the standoff from her office doorway, intervened with a suggestion. What if we treated this as a therapeutic support animal trial? I could document the psychological benefits, and we could reassess after a month. The compromise allowed Chance to accompany Michael to school under strict conditions. What the administrators didn't anticipate was how rapidly Michael's emotional and social progress would accelerate with his four-legged companion by his side. Students who had previously avoided Michael now approached with curiosity about his golden companion. "Can I pet him?" became a common question that opened conversations where before there had been uncomfortable silence. Michael found himself explaining Chance's rescue story, which naturally led to discussions about his own life. For perhaps the first time, Michael's peers saw beyond his disability to the resilient, compassionate person beneath, a boy who, despite his own hardships, had saved another living being. Most astonishing was Michael's academic resurgence. Teachers noted his increased participation, improved attendance, and willingness to attempt challenging tasks that previously would have triggered withdrawal. When asked about this transformation, Michael shrugged with a small smile. "It's hard to feel sorry for yourself when you're responsible for someone else," he explained. "And Chance doesn't care that I can't see. He just cares that I'm here." Eleanor, who had become a regular visitor to their apartment, began documenting Chance's unusual behaviors. Though untrained, he demonstrated many characteristics of professional guide dogs, stopping at elevation changes, navigating around obstacles, and finding doorways with uncanny precision. "I have a friend who works with guide dog trainers in San Francisco," she told Elaine one evening. "She says some dogs have natural guiding instincts, but Chance's abilities, especially without formal training, are extraordinary." As autumn progressed, Michael and Chance became inseparable. The dog slept at the foot of Michael's bed, accompanied him to school and therapy appointments, and seemed to anticipate his moods with preternatural accuracy. On days when grief overwhelmed Michael, Chance would rest his head on the boy's lap, remaining motionless for hours if necessary. During Michael's increasingly frequent good days, the dog matched his energy, playfully leading him through more ambitious walks around the neighborhood. Elaine observed these changes with cautious optimism, making notes for Dr. Rivera about improvements in Michael's sleep patterns, appetite, and willingness to engage socially. The financial strain of adding a dog to their household was offset by Michael's reduced therapy sessions and decreased need for specialized emotional support services at school. More importantly, Elaine saw glimpses of the bright, enthusiastic boy her nephew had been before tragedy struck, moments of genuine laughter that had once seemed lost forever. The most significant breakthrough came during a therapy session when Dr. Rivera asked Michael about his father for the first time in months. Instead of shutting down or changing the subject, Michael stroked Chance's ears thoughtfully before responding. "I used to think Dad left because I was broken, because taking care of a blind kid was too hard. But Chance was abandoned too, and there's nothing wrong with him. Sometimes people just can't handle their responsibilities, and that's about their weakness, not ours." October brought unexpected challenges when Chance developed a persistent cough and seemed unusually lethargic. The local veterinarian's diagnosis was devastating: heartworm disease, likely contracted during his time as a stray, complicated by a respiratory infection. "Treatment is expensive," Dr. Lawson explained gently, "and success isn't guaranteed given his previous malnutrition." Michael sat silently absorbing this information, his fingers buried in Chance's fur, tears streaming down his face for the first time in public since his father's departure. The veterinary bill represented 3 months of Elaine's savings, but she wrote the check without hesitation, recognizing what many others now saw clearly. Chance wasn't simply Michael's pet, but his lifeline, the bridge that had connected him back to the world when all other attempts had failed. "He saved Michael," she told Dr. Lawson simply. "Now we need to save him." The treatment would require weeks of limited activity and medication, a prospect that filled Michael with dread, not for himself, but for the companion who had given him purpose. Back at the apartment, Michael created a comfortable recovery space for Chance in the living room, converting the couch into a dog bed with carefully arranged pillows and blankets. That evening, he sat beside the drowsy, medicated retriever and did something he hadn't done since losing his vision. He attempted to draw, creating tactile pictures by tracing heavy marker lines that he could feel with his fingertips. "This is us," he explained to Chance. guiding the dog's paw over the raised ink. "And we're both going to get better, I promise." The turning point came unexpectedly on a rainy November afternoon, 3 weeks into Chance's treatment. Michael had developed a routine of reading aloud to the recovering dog, everything from his school assignments to adventure novels, believing that his voice provided comfort during the long hours of restricted movement. Elaine had left for her shift at the hospital, and Michael sat cross-legged beside Chance's makeshift bed, working through a history assignment about World War II when the apartment buzzer sounded. Navigating to the intercom with his white cane, Michael answered cautiously. "Hello?" The voice that responded sent an electric shock through his system, freezing him in place with his hand still pressed against the wall for support. "Michael, it's Dad. Can I come up?" The world seemed to tilt beneath Michael's feet, his carefully constructed stability suddenly threatened by the very person whose absence had necessitated its creation. Behind him, despite his weakened state, Chance rose from his bed with a low growl, sensing his human's distress. Andrew Stevens stood awkwardly in the apartment doorway, a stranger wearing a familiar cologne that triggered cascading memories in Michael's mind. "You've grown," Andrew offered lamely, his voice catching as he took in the changes in his son, the increased height, the unseeing eyes now hidden behind dark glasses, the rigid posture that communicated wariness rather than welcome. Before Michael could respond, Chance positioned himself between them, his body pressed protectively against Michael's leg, a silent guardian evaluating the newcomer with cautious attention. "Why are you here?" Michael's voice emerged steadier than he felt, one hand automatically dropping to rest on Chance's head, drawing strength from the solid presence. Andrew stepped forward, then hesitated when Chance's stance became more alert. "I've been in Arizona, getting help. For my depression, for alcoholism, things I should have addressed years ago." He paused, swallowing audibly. "The treatment center encourages making amends, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to tell you, leaving wasn't your fault." The conversation moved to the small kitchen table, with Chance maintaining his vigilant position beside Michael's chair. Andrew explained his spiral into self-destructive behavior after Sarah's death, his inability to cope with both grief and the responsibilities of parenting, and his subsequent rock-bottom experience that led to rehabilitation. Michael listened silently, his expression unreadable, fingers rhythmically stroking Chance's fur as if drawing courage from each contact. When Andrew finished, the silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken pain. "I thought you left because I was going blind," Michael finally said, his voice small but controlled. "I thought taking care of me was too much work." Andrew's sharp intake of breath was followed by the scrape of his chair as he moved closer. "No, Michael. I left because I was weak and selfish. Your blindness was never the problem. My inability to be the father you deserved was." Chance shifted position, laying his head in Michael's lap as if offering additional support during this emotional battlefield. What might have remained a tentative reconnection deepened unexpectedly when Andrew noticed the medication bottles and veterinary instructions on the counter. As Michael explained Chance's condition and remarkable impact on his life, Andrew listened with growing interest, asking questions that revealed his background in pharmaceutical sales. "The medication they've prescribed is good, but there's a newer treatment protocol that's showing better results with fewer side effects. I have contacts at several research hospitals. I could make some calls." The following week brought a flurry of activity as Andrew leveraged his professional connections to secure Chance a spot in a clinical trial at UC Davis Veterinary Medicine Center. The advanced treatment would be fully covered by the research program, a financial blessing that left Elaine speechless with relief. More significant than the practical assistance was the transformation in Michael's demeanor as he witnessed his father taking concrete action to help not himself, but the companion who had become Michael's lifeline. The drive to Davis for Chance's initial treatment assessment became an unexpected opportunity for father and son to rebuild their relationship away from the emotionally charged environment of the apartment. In the contained space of Andrew's car, with Chance resting on a blanket across the back seat, Michael found himself sharing details of his life that he'd previously kept guarded. His strategies for navigating school, his frustrations with well-meaning but clueless adults, and his dreams for the future that had begun to resurface since Chance's arrival. Dr. Melissa Chen, the veterinary specialist overseeing the clinical trial, was visibly moved by the bond between Michael and Chance. After completing her examination, she invited Michael to sit in her office rather than the general waiting area. "Your dog has something extraordinary beyond his medical condition," she explained. "His behavior indicates exceptional intelligence and empathy. With proper training to complement his natural instincts, he could become more than a companion. He could be officially certified as your guide dog." The possibility electrified Michael, addressing challenges that had seemed insurmountable just months earlier. School administrators could no longer object to Chance's presence with official certification, and public accessibility would expand dramatically. Dr. Chen explained that the process normally took months of specialized training with professional handlers, but given Chance's unique bond with Michael and demonstrated capabilities, she believed a modified program working with both of them together could be effective. "It won't be easy," she cautioned, "but from what I've seen, neither of you shies away from challenges." Andrew, who had been silently observing the conversation, spoke up with unexpected conviction. "I'd like to help make this happen. I've rented an apartment near Sacramento to be closer to Michael. I could drive them to training sessions, coordinate with specialists, whatever is needed." He looked directly at his son, though Michael couldn't see his expression. "I know I can't make up for leaving, but I want to be part of building something positive now, if you'll let me." The proposal created complex emotions for everyone involved. Elaine worried about allowing Andrew back into Michael's life, only to potentially disappoint him again. Michael experienced a confusing mixture of lingering hurt, cautious hope, and practical recognition that his father's help could make a critical difference for Chance. The dog himself seemed to make the decision easier, showing none of his initial wariness during subsequent interactions with Andrew and readily accepting treats and affection from him. December brought the first major test of this fragile new arrangement when Chance began his dual-purpose treatment and training program. The specialized facility required Michael to participate 3 times weekly, a schedule impossible to maintain with Elaine's work commitments. Andrew adjusted his sales territory to accommodate the driving requirements, demonstrating a reliability that slowly began rebuilding trust. During these drives, Chance would rest his head on the console between them, creating a physical bridge between father and son. The training process revealed strengths in both Michael and Chance that surprised even the experienced handlers. Michael's precise spatial memory and ability to create mental maps compensated for his visual impairment, while Chance demonstrated an intuitive understanding of guiding principles that typically required months to instill. "He's not learning these behaviors," observed Thomas, the lead trainer. "He's formalizing skills he already developed naturally. The bond between them accelerates everything. They communicate in ways we rarely see, even in established guide partnerships." Christmas approached with Chance's health showing remarkable improvement under the experimental treatment protocol. The persistent cough disappeared, his energy levels stabilized, and blood tests indicated the heartworm infection was responding better than expected. Equally significant was the progress in his training certification, with specialists predicting he could receive provisional guide dog status by February, months ahead of the traditional timeline. These developments created a tentative holiday spirit that had been absent from Michael's life since his mother's death. Andrew's involvement expanded gradually from transportation provider to active participant in Michael's life. He attended school conferences, researched adaptive technologies, and spent weekend afternoons with Michael and Chance at parks and public spaces, practicing navigation skills and rebuilding their relationship, one conversation at a time. The process wasn't without setbacks. Michael sometimes withdrew into protective silence when emotions became overwhelming, and Andrew occasionally lapsed into awkward paternalism rather than meeting his son as he was now. The most profound change occurred during a January training session when the handlers introduced complex urban navigation scenarios. Michael and Chance were tasked with traversing a simulated city street, complete with construction barriers, crossing signals, and unexpected obstacles. Halfway through the course, Michael became disoriented near a particularly challenging intersection. Before anxiety could overwhelm him, he felt Chance press reassuringly against his leg and heard his father's calm voice from the observation area. "You've got this, Michael. Trust yourself and trust Chance." Those words, "trust yourself," penetrated years of accumulated doubt and self-protective isolation. Michael took a deep breath, consciously loosened his white-knuckled grip on Chance's harness. and relied on the communication they had developed together. The pair completed the course with remarkable precision, drawing applause from the training staff. When Michael reached the finish point, he found himself enveloped in his father's embrace, the first hug they had shared since before Sarah's death. More significant than the physical contact was Michael's realization that he hadn't flinched or pulled away. The provisional certification arrived on a clear February morning, delivered by Dr. Chen herself during a special ceremony at the training center. "This is unusual," she acknowledged, handing Michael the official documentation he couldn't see but held reverently nonetheless. Guide dogs typically work with adults, and certification usually requires years of professional training. But Chance has demonstrated exceptional abilities, and your partnership represents something truly special. Michael's fingers traced the embossed seal on the certificate, while Chance sat attentively at his side, seemingly aware of the significance of the moment. The certification brought immediate practical improvements to Michael's independence. School administrators welcomed Chance officially. The local transit system recognized his service animal status, allowing easier transportation, and public spaces became more accessible. Beyond these tangible benefits was the profound psychological impact. Michael's identity expanded beyond the blind boy to the young man with the extraordinary guide dog. For perhaps the first time since losing his vision, people saw his capabilities before his disability. Valentine's Day marked 6 months since Michael had found Chance behind their apartment building. To celebrate both this anniversary and Chance's clean bill of health following his final treatment assessment, Andrew organized a small gathering at his Sacramento apartment. The attendees represented Michael's expanding world: Elena, who had provided initial veterinary care, Dr. Chen from the clinical trial, 2 friends from school who had become regular visitors, and even Principal Winters, whose initial resistance to Chance had transformed into enthusiastic support for their partnership. As Michael listened to the conversations flowing around him, with Chance resting contentedly at his feet, he experienced a moment of clarity about the journey they had traveled together. A dog others had abandoned had somehow found the one person who needed him most, a boy who had been similarly discarded and left to navigate darkness alone. Together, they had created something remarkable, a partnership that allowed both to transcend the limitations others had placed upon them and forge a path neither could have walked alone. Spring arrived in Bakersfield with an explosion of sense that Michael could perceive with newfound appreciation through Chance's reactions. The golden retriever would pause during their morning walks, drawing Michael's attention to flowering trees and garden blooms that remained invisible to him, but created an olfactory map of their neighborhood. This shared sensory experience became symbolic of their partnership, Chance experiencing the world visually for both of them, while Michael interpreted and contextualized these experiences with his developing cognitive framework. Michael's 15th birthday approached with a lightness that contrasted sharply with the previous year's somber occasion. Elaine and Andrew, now cautiously collaborative co-guardians, planned a celebration at Jastrow Park, the very space that had once represented fear and limitation, but had been reclaimed through countless training sessions with Chance. The guest list reflected Michael's expanding social circle, including classmates who had initially been uncomfortable with his disability, but now sought his friendship after witnessing his resilience. The transformation in Michael's academic performance caught the attention of the school district superintendent, who requested a meeting with the family. Michael's case demonstrates something our special education department has been advocating for years, she explained, seated across from Andrew, Elaine and Michael with Chance attentively positioned beside his partner. The right support system, both human and animal, can completely reshape educational outcomes for students with disabilities. We'd like to feature your story in our presentation to the board for expanded service animal accommodation. What might have once been a traumatic public exposure now represented an opportunity for meaningful impact. Michael agreed to participate in the presentation, working with his English teacher to prepare remarks that focused not on the tragedy of vision loss, but on the transformative power of partnership. Chance doesn't see me as blind, he explained during preparation sessions. He sees me as his person, and that perspective helped me stop defining myself solely by what I lost. The school board presentation became a watershed moment that extended beyond educational policy. Local media covered the story, captivated by the photogenic golden retriever and the articulate young man who described their journey together. The resulting news segment caught the attention of California Guide Dogs for Independence, a prestigious training organization that had previously rejected Michael's application due to age restrictions. Their director contacted Andrew directly with an unprecedented proposal: a specialized youth partnership program inspired by Michael and Chance's success. "We've been limited by tradition, not possibility," admitted Gabriel Santos, the organization's training director, during a meeting at their Sacramento headquarters. "Your son and his dog have demonstrated that meaningful guide partnerships can begin earlier than our policies recognized. We'd like to create a pilot program for visually impaired teenagers, and we hope Michael and Chance will help us design appropriate protocols and training methodologies based on their experience." The invitation represented validation beyond what any therapeutic intervention had provided. Michael, who had once been defined by abandonment and loss, was now being recognized as an innovator and potential mentor to others facing similar challenges. The discussion expanded to include weekend workshops where Michael could share his experience with other visually impaired teens, while Chance demonstrated the possibilities of canine partnership. For the first time, Michael found himself positioned as a leader rather than someone to be pitied or accommodated. Andrew's involvement in this expanding opportunity revealed continued growth in his commitment. He reconfigured his work schedule to accommodate the weekend programs, converted his spare bedroom into a space that accommodated Michael's overnight stays, and educated himself about adaptive technologies that could enhance the workshop curriculum. These tangible demonstrations of support gradually rebuilt Michael's trust, creating a relationship that acknowledged past failures while focusing primarily on present possibilities. Summer brought another milestone when Dr. Chen contacted them about a documentary project focusing on innovative veterinary medicine. The filmmaker wanted to feature Chance's remarkable recovery and subsequent service certification as evidence of cutting-edge treatment protocols and non-traditional application of guide training. This could help countless other animals and their human partners, Dr. Chen explained. "Your story demonstrates that physical challenges, whether human or canine, don't need to limit potential when the right interventions and partnerships are established." The filming process pushed Michael beyond his comfort zone, requiring him to articulate his journey while being recorded in various environments. Initially hesitant, he found unexpected confidence with Chance by his side, the dog's steady presence a constant reminder of how far they had traveled together. During one particularly emotional interview about his father's absence and return, Chance sensed Michael's distress before any human in the room, pressing his body against Michael's legs and providing tactile reassurance that helped him continue with remarkable composure. Andrew, watching this interaction from behind the cameras, experienced a profound realization about the depth of connection between his son and the animal who had effectively replaced him during his absence. Instead of jealousy, he felt immense gratitude that Michael had found unconditional support when human relationships had failed him. Later that evening, in a quiet moment at his apartment, Andrew acknowledged this to Michael directly. "Chance was there for you when I wasn't. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn the trust he gained naturally, and I'm thankful every day that he found you." The documentary aired on public television that September, coinciding with National Guide Dog Month. The timing created opportunities for Michael and Chance to participate in educational events throughout Northern California, sharing their story with community organizations, school groups, and healthcare providers. These experiences gradually transformed Michael's relationship with his disability from a private burden to a platform for advocacy and connection with others facing similar challenges. Perhaps the most significant development came through an unexpected source: Michael's creative writing. Encouraged by his English teacher to process his experiences through narrative, Michael began crafting stories about a visually impaired detective whose extraordinary guide dog possessed unique crime-solving instincts. Fictional adventures, heavily inspired by his partnership with Chance, captured the imagination of his classmates and eventually his teacher, who submitted the first completed story to a young adult writing competition without telling Michael. The notification of his first-place win arrived on the anniversary of his mother's death, a date that had previously brought only sorrow but now carried a bittersweet complexity. Seated in the small cemetery with Chance lying respectfully beside him, Michael shared the news with Sarah's memory. "I think you would have loved Chance, Mum," he said softly, his fingers tracing the raised letters on the award certificate. "He helped me find parts of myself I thought died with you. And he helped me understand Dad better too, how people can leave but still find their way back if they're brave enough to try." October marked 1 year since Andrew had reappeared in Michael's life, a milestone they acknowledged, with a weekend hiking trip to Sequoia National Park. The excursion represented culminating trust, Michael relying on both Chance's guiding abilities on unfamiliar trails and his father's commitment to safety and accurate environmental descriptions. Together they navigated paths among ancient trees, Andrew describing visual details, while Michael shared the rich sensory landscape Chance helped him detect, the varied textures of bark beneath his fingertips, the changing density of air as elevation increased, the subtle shifts in temperature between sunlight and shadow. The hiking experience crystallized something Michael had been gradually discovering, that his blindness had not eliminated his connection to the world, but transformed it. Where once he had mourned the loss of visual beauty, he now appreciated the multisensory richness available through his other senses, especially when enhanced by Chance's reactions and his father's descriptions. This integration of perspectives created a more complete experience than any of them could have achieved individually, a metaphor for their evolving family dynamic. Elaine observed these changes with quiet satisfaction, recognizing her role in maintaining stability during Michael's darkest period while gracefully accommodating Andrew's reintegration into their lives. The arrangement had evolved from rigid custody schedules to fluid cooperation centered around Michael's needs and activities. When a career advancement opportunity arose requiring additional evening shifts, Elaine accepted without her previous guilt, knowing Michael now had multiple support systems, including his father, Chance, and an expanding social network. The approaching holidays brought planning discussions that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Andrew suggested hosting Thanksgiving at his apartment, while Christmas would be celebrated at Elaine's. Michael, listening to these amicable negotiations, realized something profound. His once fractured family had reconfigured into something different but equally valid, expanded to include Chance and the various specialists and friends who had contributed to their journey. The painful absence at the center of their previous holiday gatherings had been filled not by replacement but by growth around the empty space. December brought heavy fog to the Central Valley, creating navigation challenges even for experienced guide teams. During one particularly dense morning, Michael and Chance encountered a disoriented elderly man while walking to school. The man, clearly confused and suffering from dementia, couldn't remember his address or contact information. Where Michael might once have felt helpless in such a situation, he now responded with calm competence, using his phone's accessibility features to contact authorities, while Chance helped keep the frightened man calm until help arrived. The incident made the local newspaper, with a photo of Michael and Chance accompanying the elderly man safely to a reunification point with his worried family. The headline, "Blind Teen and Guide Dog Navigate Through Fog to Save Lost Senior," might once have bothered Michael with its emphasis on his disability. Now he recognized it as factually accurate without being defining. His blindness was simply one aspect of a multifaceted identity that included son, student, writer, advocate, friend, and partner to an extraordinary dog who had transformed limitation into purpose. As Michael's 15th year drew to a close, he found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun in desperate circumstances behind an apartment building. The golden retriever, who now slept contentedly at the foot of his bed, had entered his life when both were at their lowest point, abandoned, wounded, and uncertain of survival. Their unlikely partnership had not only healed their individual traumas, but created rippling impacts through their community, challenging assumptions about disability, human-animal connections, and the capacity for redemption. Michael's world, which had contracted to the dimensions of his bedroom during those darkest days after his father's departure, now expanded well beyond the boundaries of Bakersfield. The workshops with other visually impaired teens continued to grow, speaking engagements multiplied, and his writing gained recognition in broader circles. More significant than these external validations was his internal landscape, the restored confidence, the capacity for joy, and the ability to forge meaningful connections despite the challenges of navigating a world he could no longer see. Have you ever noticed how life's darkest moments sometimes lead to unexpected light? Standing on the stage of the California Youth Achievement Awards, 16-year-old Michael Stevens adjusted his dark glasses nervously as applause filled the auditorium. Beside him, Chance sat perfectly poised in his official guide harness, the golden retriever's calm presence providing the anchor that had steadied Michael through countless challenges over the past 2 years. This moment, being recognized for establishing the state's first peer mentorship program, connecting visually impaired teens with service animals, represented a journey neither could have imagined when they found each other behind an apartment building. Blindness taught me that sometimes we need to lose one way of seeing to discover others, Michael began, his confident voice betraying no hint of the withdrawn, devastated child he had once been. But chance taught me something even more important, that when we help someone else navigate their darkness, we often find our own way forward. The audience fell silent, captivated by the poised young man and the extraordinary dog who gazed up at him with unmistakable devotion, a living embodiment of the transformation possible when abandonment becomes opportunity. Michael's program had already paired 15 visually impaired teenagers with specially trained service animals, creating partnerships that extended beyond physical guidance to emotional support and social connection. What had begun as weekend workshops had evolved into a comprehensive initiative supported by 3 major guide dog organizations and a state educational grant. More significant than institutional recognition was the impact on individual lives. Young people who had experienced isolation, similar to Michael's early struggles, now found community and purpose through their animal partnerships. In the audience, Andrew and Elaine sat side by side. Their earlier tensions dissolved into shared pride and collaborative parenting. Andrew had recently accepted a position with a pharmaceutical company specializing in veterinary medications, inspired by Chance's treatment journey and the recognition that healing came in many forms. Elaine had reduced her nursing hours to coordinate family support services for the mentorship program, her professional experience providing valuable insights for other families adapting to disability. Together, they had created a support system that honored Sarah's memory while building something new. Dr. Chen, seated nearby with several colleagues from the veterinary program, reflected on how a single case had transformed their approach to both animal rehabilitation and service training. The protocols developed during Chance's treatment had been refined and implemented for dozens of other animals, while the modified guide training curriculum, inspired by their partnership, had been adopted by organizations throughout the country. What had begun as an exception had evolved into best practice, challenging long-standing assumptions about age requirements, training methodologies, and the remarkable adaptability of both humans and animals. As Michael concluded his acceptance speech to enthusiastic applause, he knelt to embrace Chance, whispering words of gratitude that no one else could hear. The golden retriever, now in his prime at 3 years old, responded with the gentle nudge that had become their private language of connection. This wordless communication represented something profound, a partnership that transcended conventional understanding and demonstrated how loss could transform into extraordinary connection when met with courage and compassion. The reception following the ceremony brought well-wishers from throughout their extended community. Michael's English teacher proudly shared news that his stories featuring the visually impaired detective and canine partner had been accepted for publication by a young adult imprint. Several students from the mentorship program approached with their own service animals, creating a momentary gathering of extraordinary partnerships that represented individual journeys from limitation to possibility. Most moving was the arrival of the elderly man Michael and Chance had assisted during the foggy December morning. Now recovered from his episode and eager to express continued gratitude. Later that evening, as the Stevens family celebrated at a restaurant near the venue, Michael reflected on how profoundly Chance had altered their collective destiny. The dog who dozed contentedly beneath the table had become the centerpiece of their reconfigured family. The constant companion who had guided Michael through darkness, facilitated Andrew's redemption, and provided Elaine with reassurance that her nephew could achieve independence despite his challenges. What had initially seemed like one more burden in an impossible situation had become the catalyst for healing and purpose. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't heard Chance that day," Michael mused, his fingers automatically finding the dog's silky ears beneath the table. "What if I had stayed inside instead of investigating the sound?" Andrew considered this counterfactual seriously before responding. "I believe some connections are meant to happen, Michael. Not in a predetermined way, but because certain souls recognize each other's needs across the barriers that should keep them apart." As Michael prepared for his junior year of high school, educational possibilities expanded beyond what anyone had imagined during those dark days after his father's departure. Universities had begun recruiting him based on his academic performance, writing portfolio, and demonstrated leadership. Medical advances in gene therapy offered possibilities for partial vision restoration, though Michael approached these options with thoughtful consideration rather than desperate hope. Most significantly, his identity had evolved beyond disability to encompass multiple passions and capabilities, with blindness representing just one aspect of his complex life experience. The documentary featuring Chance's journey from abandoned stray to certified guide dog had been expanded into a full-length film scheduled for educational distribution nationally. Michael had collaborated on the script, ensuring it captured not just the extraordinary events, but the emotional truth of their partnership. The production team had initially worried about anthropomorphizing Chance's perspective, but Michael insisted that acknowledging the dog's agency and emotional intelligence was essential to understanding their story. "Recognition goes both ways in a true partnership," he explained during production meetings. "Chance recognized something in me worth saving, just as I saw something special in him." If you had told Michael Stevens 3 years earlier that his blindness would become the foundation for purpose rather than limitation, he would have dismissed such platitudes with bitter skepticism. The journey from that defensive, wounded place to his current life had not followed a linear path of inspirational triumph, but rather a complex process of adaptation, setbacks, and incremental growth. Chance had been the constant through these transitions, the steady presence whose unconditional acceptance created space for Michael to reconstruct his identity and relationships on new terms. Have you ever experienced how a single connection can rewrite your understanding of purpose? For the Stevens family, Chance represented this transformative catalyst, a golden retriever who entered their lives at the moment of greatest vulnerability and revealed possibilities none could have envisioned alone. The abandoned dog and the rejected boy had recognized in each other not brokenness but extraordinary potential, creating a partnership that expanded to include healing for an absent father, renewed purpose for a struggling aunt, and inspiration for countless others facing their own versions of darkness. As the summer evening faded into night, Michael and Chance walked together along a familiar route in their neighborhood, navigating by touch, sound, and the invisible communication developed through countless miles traveled side by side. Their shadows stretched long beneath streetlights, boy and dog moving in perfect synchronization, each step representing trust built through vulnerability and strength discovered through service to each other. In this ordinary moment lay the extraordinary truth of their story, that sometimes our greatest guides arrive when we are lost, and our deepest connections form when we have been abandoned. So next time you pass a stray animal or someone struggling through darkness, remember that rescues often flow in both directions. The golden retriever who became Michael Stevens' eyes gained a home, purpose, and healing in return. Sometimes the greatest miracles aren't dramatic reversals of fortune, but rather the quiet transformation that happens when two beings recognize in each other the exact companionship they need to navigate life's most challenging terrain. In this recognition lies the possibility that none of us, human or animal, need remain abandoned when we open ourselves to unexpected connection.